Hey everyone, and the beat goes on. Welcome back to episode 8 of This Week in Massachusetts Theater, and we got some great shows that we're going to be reviewing this week. But right now I'm recording live from the North Shore, Bill Haney's North Shore Music Theater in Beverly, Mass, where I'm about to see the Cher show. Will I like it? Stay tuned for the review. Talk to you in a minute. Bye-bye. Hey there, welcome back. So this week we're going to be reviewing 4 shows. The first one is Death Trap out in Boylston, not Boston, Boylston, Mass, which was being done by Calliope Productions. The next show is Dracula, a Comedy of Terrors, which was done by Worcester County Light Opera Company in Worcester, Mass. Then we were going to review Something Rotten, the musical Something Rotten, which was being performed by a Common Thread Theater Company out of Framingham. And finally, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I'll be reviewing the Cher show here at North Shore Music Theater in Beverly. So just want to let you know that before we get into the reviews, though, that we're going to take one last look at the shows that are continuing in October. Next week we'll take a look at the month of November, and I hope you stay tuned for that. And again, if I've just to let you know, I've added a couple of shows, so to get the full listing, make sure that you visit the METRMag site and check out the METRMag site often to take for any new shows that come in after the broadcast. Also, just make sure to check out our featured stories page, because every once in a while I'll put a new article or a new interview up there, along with posting some shows that if I'm not able to review, at least they get a little extra mention on that page. And again, if I missed any company, it's not intentional, I apologize, but do keep sending me your information so we can get you added to the METRMag site, and we can mention you on an upcoming podcast. And now, on with the show. Thanks. Continuing shows include Hamilton by Lin-Manuel Miranda, continues from Broadway in Boston at the Citizens Opera House in Boston through November 2nd. The Counter by Megan Kennedy continues at Umbrella Art Center in Concord, Mass. Through November 9th. Tick, Tick, Boom by Jonathan Larson also continues at Umbrella Art Center in Concord, Mass. Through November 23rd. Sardines, a Comedy About Death, written and performed by Chris Grace, continues at Huntington Theater Company in Boston, Mass. Through November 16th. William Shakespeare's Macbeth continues from Actors Shakespeare Project in Watertown, Mass. Through October 26th. Death Trap by Ira Levin will be opening this weekend from Calliope Productions in Boylston, Mass., running through October 26, 2025. Other shows opening this weekend and next week are the musical Something Rotten from a Common Thread Theater Company in Framingham, Mass., which runs through October 26th. Ride the Cyclone by Jacob Richmond and Brooke Maxwell hits the stage at the Theater Company of Saugus through October 26th. Now, this one may sound familiar. Dracula, a Comedy of Terrors by Gordon Greenberg and Steve Rosen. Well, while it's closing in Taunton, it's also going to be opening this season for Worcester County Light Opera Company in Worcester, Mass., running through October 26th. The Cher Show, with a book by Rick Elise, premieres at the North Shore Music Theater in Beverly through November 2nd. Another one that may sound familiar, Six, continues its national tour at the Providence Performing Arts Center in Providence, Rhode Island, from October 22nd through October 26, 2025. Robert Harling's Steel Magnolias begins its run at the Majestic Theater in West Springfield from October 23rd through November 30th. Murder for Two by Joe Kinosian and Kellen Blair will debut at the Greater Boston Stage Company in Stoneham, Mass. On October 24th, running through November 9th. Wait Until Dark by Frederick Knott and Jeffrey Hatcher premieres at the Cannon Theater in Devens, Mass. October 24th and continues through November 9th. Lizard Boy, a new musical by Justin Huertas, debuts at the Speakeasy Stage Company in Boston, Mass. On October 24th and runs through November 22nd, 2025. Finally, Honeymoon at Graveside Manor by Pat Cook is a Halloween treat from Pasture Prime Players in Charlton, Mass., premiering October 31st and running through November 9th, 2025. Again, for tickets or more information on any of these upcoming shows, you can contact the theaters directly or use the links that are available on the listings at METRMag.com. In Calliope Productions' faithful adaptation of the suspenseful Tony Award-nominated comedy thriller Death Trap, the focus seems less on the suspense and more on the comedy, which leads to many surprising moments, making this a must-see show. The efficient Calliope cast and creative team led by director Linda Orozco has staged a stylish, flowing story, which was written by Ira Levin in 1978, and everybody should be commended for a fine production. There's only one thing that pulls back Death Trap from being totally flawless, and we'll get to that later, but this is still an outstanding show. The two-act play comes with numerous plot twists that hit you from the very beginning to the very end. The current show by Calliope's Orozco is highly praiseworthy for its seamless staging, augmented by a marvelous set design and use of the Calliope stage for Death Trap, which has not one single inch of wasted space and looks terrific. Set in Westport, Connecticut, famed mystery thriller playwright Sidney Bruhl, played by Jeremy Wolofsky, works in a study that is described in Levin's script as a handsomely converted stable grafted onto an authentically colonial house. In Death Trap, Sidney invites young writer Clifford, played by Max Cantor, over to his place, where they can collaborate on the needed improvements of the story's rough draft. Wolofsky is thoroughly enjoyable in the role that, while some might not feel he resembles others that have played the part in the past, Wolofsky effortlessly leans into the wit of Sidney and less on Sidney's usually overplayed sophistication and smug, erudite personality. Wolofsky and Cantor have fine camaraderie as the writers who slowly move from being collaborators to competitors, and then later from allies to adversaries. At the Bruhl home, Clifford meets Myra, played by Joan Stewart, Sidney's charming wife, and through what feels like numerous carnival rides in the plot, where the show concludes is a far cry from where it commences. Even though Myra is a fairly one-dimensional character, Stewart does quite well focusing on the supportive nature and ultimate torment that comes with being Sidney's spouse. Where Levin's cleverness is most evident is in the show's structure, where we see that Levin's show Death Trap recognizes itself for what it is. Levin masterfully uses his own scripted stage descriptions and directions as much of the dialogue in effort to parallel events taking place in his own story. As the Calliope story progresses, we are introduced to the hysterical Helga, played by Maren Sanders, a nosy psychic neighbor, and Porter, played by Michael Hayes, Sidney and Myra's dependable attorney. Hayes is quite good as the relatively minor character of Porter, usually played rather stodgy, but Hayes gives him a more upbeat demeanor which elevates his brief moments on stage. It is the feloniously funny Helga, as played by Sanders, that steals attention away from every other character in the over-the-top manner that comes part and parcel with the character of the intrusive celebrity psychic neighbor. Sanders is pure comedy gold in the role, with impeccable timing and with nearly every single line delivered perfectly. Not only ingenious, the play is also quite funny, even during some of the show's darker, more frenzied moments. The plot thickens with many competitive maneuvers in the ongoing game of one-upmanship between Sidney and Clifford that help maintain the even keel of humor and surprise. However, that one area which the Calliope Productions production of Death Trap might be stretching credulity to its limit is in the moments where Cantor's Clifford is supposed to be physically threatening of Wojciechowski's Sidney character, and it just doesn't fly. Overall, Cantor's performance is exemplary, leaning heavily into the smugness and shrewdness of Clifford. However, even at the height of masterful martial arts training, in no universe could this Clifford snap this Sidney's neck or do him severe bodily harm, reducing some of the adversarial aspect of the character. A relatively minor drawback that does not otherwise detract from the balance of this terrific staging. At approximately 2 hours with one intermission, Calliope Productions show staging of Death Trap continues in Boylston, Mass. Through October 26, 2025. With Halloween just around the corner, this production of Death Trap is a welcome treat with a bag full of dramatic tricks. For tickets and more information, contact the box office at 508-869-6887 or visit www.ticketstage.com/t/Calliope. And to read the full review, visit METRMag.com. Worcester County Light Opera Company, or Wicklock, flies into spooky season like a bat. No, not like one of those thrown occasionally at Fenway, with Dracula, a comedy of terrors. A romp done at breakneck speed, and which is bloody funny. The 90-minute farce, written by Gordon Greenberg and Steve Rosen and craftily directed by Wicklock director Lisa Tierney, pokes fun at Bram Stoker's legendary vampire tale to hysterical results. 5 actors play multiple roles from the original Dracula saga in this send-up of the macabre legend. Dracula, a comedy of terrors, actually first debuted as a radio play in May 2020. You may recall why it performed this way by looking at that date. With an all-star cast including Christopher Sieber, Laura Benanti, Anna Lee Ashford, Ashley Park, Alan Tudyk, James Monroe Iglehart, who only just recently visited Worcester, and, for some reason, John Stamos. Dracula, a comedy of terrors, was further developed by Greenberg at several theaters including Chicago Shakespeare Theater, Capitol Rep in New York, and Montreal before ultimately premiering off-Broadway in 2023. In the Wicklock story, Lucy Westfeld, played by Sophia Vesecchia, along with her father, Dr. Westfeld, played by Liz Couture, and her fiancé, Jonathan Harker, played by George Smith, enlist the help of famed female vampire hunter, Dr. Jean Van Helsing, played by Sky Arsenal, when Lucy's sister, Mina, also Sky Arsenal, just go with it, falls ill with a mysterious disease of the blood, with Van Helsing suspecting vampirism. Their suspicions lead to their hunt for the equally dangerous and debonair Count Dracula, played by A. Foley, a lustful, manipulative, vain vampire from Transylvania, obsessed with either necking with Lucy or with Lucy's neck, one or the other. Smith is quite adaptable on stage as actor 1, which includes the cowardly real estate agent Harker, while also taking on other minor roles that include using accents and puppetry skills as the Scottish Lord Cavendish, British Lord Worthington, and Texan Lord Have Mercy. Yes, Texan. While also seen in the play portraying a bosun and a gravedigger. As actor 2, Couture showcases great skill at split-second comedic timing as learned, albeit misogynist, Dr. Westfeld, who is quite adversarial of the female Dr. Van Helsing and doubling as Reddenfield in an insane patient of Dr. Westfeld, who loves to eat bugs. Couture also impresses as the ill-fated captain of a doomed ship caught in a raging storm while carrying some quote-unquote deadly cargo. Actor 3 roles include the character of Lucy Westfeld, and Vesecchia is absolutely charming as the young, courageous woman that is the object of desire by both living and dead, man and vampire. It also displays great versatility in the other Act 3 roles of a driver and a kleptomaniac servant named Kitty Rutherford. Arsenal gives 2 resounding portrayals as actor 4. First, as Lucy's unattractive sister Mina. Well, perhaps unattractive is too cruel. Let's just say Mina suffers from an acute case of appearance deficit. Secondly, Arsenal takes full charge for the second half of the play, appearing as a serious doctor from Germany the learned and fearless Dr. Van Helsing, Dr. Gene Van Helsing. Finally, as the show's fifth actor, A. Foley dominates in every scene with impeccable comedic timing as the voracious vampire. Similar to Shakespeare Abridged and Baskervilles, in Dracula, A Comedy of Terrors, it should be noted that with the intentionally frenzied structured comedies like these, in addition to execution of the material by a completely unified company of expert comedic performers, the technical requirements are equally critical. At 90 minutes, no intermission, Whitlock succeeds on every technical level with Dracula, from an inventive set to multiple costumes, wigs and props all calculated for whirlwind exchanges involved, to the proficient use of lighting and sound cues, all integral to the success of Dracula, A Comedy of Terrors. The coffin closes on Dracula, A Comedy of Terrors at Whitlock by October 26, 2025. So try and catch this violently gag-laden vampire story before it flies away from Worcester forever. For tickets and more information, call Whitlock at 508-753-4383 or visit www.whitlock.org. To read the full review, visit METRMag.com. The amusing Broadway musical Something Rotten is now entertaining audiences thanks to a common thread theater company in Framingham, making for some terrific fall fun just as we snow haters prepare for our annual winter of our discontent. Common Thread has constructed a fine show featuring solid leads, a spirited ensemble, and an inventive creative team. With the above combination, the Common Thread approach has resulted in a production that showcases an abundance of fine sets and costumes. The primary set is well constructed, allowing for greater ease during scene transitions throughout the two-act musical. The show is also elevated thanks to a great score executed by the terrific live orchestra under conductor Nare Kim. This faithful Common Thread adaptation of the Broadway smash brings with it an onslaught of laughter that will spread as fast as the plague, but in a good way. Nominated for 10 Tony Awards, Something Rotten is a musical that never fails to bring the funny, and thank God and the Bard for that. Something Rotten opened on Broadway in 2015 and played 708 performances. The story, performed completely tongue-in-cheek, although not quite farcical, takes place during the Renaissance, specifically in the 1590s. There's a prevailing sweetness to the story as it flows, which is a major factor in what endears it to its audience. The musical balances a solid plot with a wonderful score and consistent character development thanks to the musical's writing team of John O'Farrell, with music and lyrics by Carrie Kirkpatrick and Wayne Kirkpatrick, under the highly effective guidance of Common Thread director Liam Devine, with music direction by Catherine Denny and assistant music director Kim, and highly enjoyable and clever choreography provided by Julia Hoffmaster of Hopkinton High School, class of 2026. All elements of the show have equal part energy and humor. As the musical Something Rotten begins, we are introduced to a minstrel, enthusiastically played by Madison Canfora, that guides us through much of the show. Brothers and co-writing team Nick and Nigel Bottom, played by Johnny Vartabedian and Joseph Kantrowitz, respectively, find themselves continuously and hopelessly outwritten and outperformed by egomaniacal wunderkind William Shakespeare, played by Ben Gold, whose creative role has propelled him to superstar status in the eyes of his fans. Vartabedian and Kantrowitz have undeniable chemistry, critical in portraying the codependent siblings. Vartabedian as Nick is an incredible singer, with impeccable comedic timing, giving a superb performance. Kantrowitz's portrayal of Nigel is unique when compared to other portrayals of the character, which may take some familiar with the show quite by surprise. But you know what? It absolutely works and provides a nice added dimension to the brotherly relationship between Nigel and Nick. As the sophisticated yet base and egotistic Shakespeare, Gold brings a fine sense of confidence to the role of the scheming bard, who finds himself with a severe case of writer's block and will do anything to burst through that blockage. The choreography by Hoffmeister is absolutely outstanding, never detracting from the focus of the story and using the varied skill levels of each dancer and ensemble member accordingly. Also, the tap sequence between Nick and Shakespeare and Bottom's Gonna Be on Top comes off as surprising, and a much welcome surprise it is. The characters we meet during Something Rotten are all extremely likable, even the ones who aren't intended to be so nice. One of the nicer characters we meet is Nick's charming and supportive wife, Bee, played by Violet Joy Hansen, who is delightful in every scene, especially resonating in her Act 1 number, Right Hand Man. Similarly, Nigel meets and falls for pretty Puritan, Portia, played by Kenley Murray, who becomes ardently absorbed by the potential poet, encouraging Nigel to evolve as a writer. Murray gives a fine performance as Portia and is captivating in the song I Love the Way, sung with Kantrowitz. Financially desperate for a surefire hit play big enough to compete with Shakespeare's popularity, Nick seeks out a soothsayer and stumbles upon Nostradamus himself. That is, Thomas Nostradamus, played by Steve Lillis, descendant nephew of the famous original soothsayer. Lillis leans less into the musicality and more into the comedy inherent in the role of Nostradamus, who presents his premonitions more like he's grasping at the very frail straws than solid brass rings. Nostradamus gets a lot of fragmented information from the future, and this leads to some hilarious results later in the show. However, one big concept Nostradamus gets 100% correct. He advises Nick of a future full of Broadway-caliber musicals, which is where the show really takes off, thanks to a high-stepping musical number aptly titled A Musical. Between A Musical and the second act's Make an Omelet, many shows are spoofed, referenced, revered, lampooned, and sampled, from Stephen Sondheim to Andrew Lloyd Webber shows to Les Mis to Music Man to Annie, Chorus Line, and more. Nick asks about Shakespeare's next work, intending to write it before Shakespeare. But unknown to Nick, one major element Nostradamus does not get right is the title of Shakespeare's greatest work. So placing all his faith in Nostradamus, Nick decides to write his musical Omelet, realizing that he is actually stealing Shakespeare's destined story of Hamlet. It is Nigel in the fine performance by Kantrowitz who provides the perfect moral compass which pits himself against Nick's immoral decision and direction in the story. The unbridled enthusiasm shared by the musical's ensemble is infectious, which should keep audiences entertained. At approximately 2 hours with one intermission, a Common Thread Theatre Company staging of Something Rotten continues at 214 Concord Street in Framingham until October 26, 2025. This Common Thread cast and creative team have really pulled together to make Something Rotten something special and something everybody should want to see. For tickets and more information, contact a Common Thread Theatre Company at 508-834-4682 or visit www.acommonthreadtheatre.org. To read the full review, visit METRMag.com. At Bill Haney's North Shore Music Theater, NSMT, a dynamic cast and ensemble rocks Beverly with the fiercely fun musical The Cher Show, and it is a wonderful way to close out a terrific season. While the cast of characters are aptly portrayed, it is the choreography executed by an electrifying ensemble of NSMT dancers in a multitude of wild costumes that makes this show a must-see. This show is a tribute to one of the fiercest entertainers ever to step into the spotlight, Cher, with a book by Rick Elise that tells us Cher's story using songs Cher performed throughout her career. The musical was developed in 2017 in New York City. The world premiere was held in Chicago in 2018, and the Cher Show officially opened on Broadway by the end of that year. It continued on Broadway until 2019, ending after 34 previews and 296 regular performances. The Cher Show would go on to win Tony Awards for Stephanie J. Block as Cher, lead actress in a musical, and for Bob Mackie, costume design for a musical. In a unique storytelling experience, the part of Cher is shared by 3 performers. The 3 interact with each other and help each other out at various points. Our guide for the evening is the first performer, who also plays Cher during the 1980s and 1990s and goes by the name Star, played by Sarah Gettelfinger. Immediately, one might take note that Gettelfinger does not bear a striking resemblance to the entertainer icon that is Cher. However, the Cher show, especially as cast, directed in the round for NSMT by Kevin P. Hill, and is choreographed by Sarah Andreas, it is not intended to be a Cher impersonation contest, but rather a representation of the performer's life. This musical is intended as a biography, not a look-alike, sound-alike tribute act. But that doesn't mean the effort to authentically portray the iconic Cher isn't there. It totally is, but it is done so in stages. More on that in a moment. With the use of projected imagery surrounding the NSMT stage and a judicious use of selected set pieces, the Cher show is presented in such a way to make us all feel as if we are in the audience at the taping of a Cher television special. The NSMT orchestra, led by music director Milton Granger, is outstanding from beginning to end as it navigates through a complex weaving of hit songs that is the show's score. Gettelfinger, a star, introduces each person from Cher's life as if they were a guest star on the special. Thanks to Gettelfinger's impressive take on Cher, we see the iconic performer closer to the age she is now. The above approach helps set the stage for a look back at the entertainer's personal saga and life's journey. Joining Gettelfinger on stage is a second Cher, who goes by the moniker Babe, played by Madeline Huddleston, portraying Cher in the 1950s and 1960s as young Sherilyn Sarkeesian, and her career begins to blossom. Huddleston is a marvelous singer, capturing the essence of Cher in all the songs in which she is featured. Huddleston as Babe latches onto the naivete and exuberance of the younger Cher had as a child, living without a father figure for most of it. Yet at the absence was offset by the younger Cher found herself being guided in those earlier times by an equally brave and unrelenting mother, Georgia Holt, played by Angie Schworer. Schworer is hilarious, showcasing a shared acerbic wit as both Holt and then later as another entertainment icon, Lucille Ball, who would wind up giving Cher some important life lessons at a crossroads. Also, kudos to Cher and book writer Rick Elise for giving a nod to Lucy by giving her arguably the funniest line in the show. The best part of NSMT's Cher show is in how it encapsulates and celebrates the life of Cher, but does not overly sweeten or sanitize things. Whatever happens on stage really feels like moments of a true story we are witnessing and not something sanitized for our viewing pleasure. We witness how 16-year-old Sherilyn, who shortened her name to Cher, would meet and fall in love with struggling songwriter Sonny Bono, played by Frankie Marassa V. At no point does Marassa's portrayal of Bono feel like he's playing Sonny the Man as a parody or a cartoonish figure. Marassa shows us that Bono was an accomplished writer, singer, entertainer, and most importantly, like Cher, a flawed yet remarkable and very real human being. As Marassa and Huddleston start singing Sonny and Cher's signature song, I Got You, Babe, that song shows how everything changed for the famed duo. There is an emotional frankness in the Cher show that also contains an uncomfortable forthrightness many have come to expect from Cher. What may prove unexpected is the equally inherent vulnerability and openness and willingness by Cher to be there for others, usually at a great disservice to herself. The final performer in this triumvirate is called Lady, played by Carissa Hoagland, who recalls Cher's more turbulent career and life during the 1970s. Ariel as Lady illustrates the combative side of Cher as the entertainer at peak television stardom. Cher is relentlessly mansplained and manhandled by Bono and other powerful men in a very male-dominated industry. Through multiple rises and falls, Ariel convincingly brings forth that side of Cher that didn't always roll with the punches. In fact, Cher threw a few punches herself, and each time she came back stronger and stronger. The undeniable chemistry between Gettelfinger, Huddleston, and Ariel shows the trio to be completely focused on truthfully and respectfully telling Cher's story. The plethora of musical highlights includes such hits as The Beat Goes On, If I Could Turn Back Time, Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves, Bang Bang, I Found Someone, and many, many more, all interwoven into the story and knocked out of the park by the intertwining, mesmerizing trio of Gettelfinger, Huddleston, and Ariel. As mentioned, the NSMT special effects associated with the Cher show is all impressive, all helping propel Cher's story forward. Almost overtaking and replacing the Cher story, however, is the costuming by the one and only legendary costume designer Bob Mackie, which on its own is reason for seeing this show. Celebrating his avant-garde approach, the parade of Mackie quintessential signature line of costuming is among the outrageous, glorious, and astonishing on display. There's a plethora of costumes from Las Vegas showgirl, wacky sketch characters designs, elegant evening gowns, so risque they seemingly were designed with the intent to give 1970s network censors a cerebral hemorrhage. Dan Finotti, and I apologize if I'm butchering some of these names, Dan Finotti is exuberant and animated as Bob Mackie, showing great range later by appearing as the more grounded director Robert Altman, who critically guides Cher through a pivotal acting career decision while disregarding his own critically poor decision for making that dreadful movie Popeye. As stated, the NSMT ensemble is fervently intoxicating, arousing, and exhilarating, tasked with dozens of arduous, incredibly quick costume changes throughout the 2.5-hour musical. We also meet Cher's other significant loves, rock legend Greg Allman, played by Brenton Kosier, and then up-and-coming actor Rob Camilletti, played by Andrew Tufano. But neither relationship sparks as resoundingly or feels as impactful as the one Cher had with Sonny. Whether that is fact, fiction, or just an artistic choice is all speculation and irrelevant to this wonderful in-the-round staging. The important thing is that Cher knows the truth. That said, Kosier and Marasa are given a terrific moment to shine together vocally in the scrappy duet Dark Lady, a number which is supported by a fine dance ensemble led by NSMT company dance captain Milena Como, who appears as the featured Dark Lady herself. In the end, though, the Cher Show isn't about the men behind Cher. The Cher Show is about Cher, and as such, we need to ask ourselves if we walk away from the show having learned much about this artist than we knew going in. Knowing full well the obsession some have with Cher, for them I would say it's quite doubtful. They would simply continue to boast how they know more about Cher than Cher knows about Cher. For the rest of us, though, the Cher Show does allow some time to get to know, not just from the journey undertaken by young Sherilyn Sarkeesian, but the ongoing journey still traveled by the often imitated but never duplicated one and only Cher. The Cher Show continues at Bill Haney's North Shore Music Theater in Beverly until November 2nd, 2025, concluding another fabulous NSMT season just before it heads into its holiday show with their highly anticipated annual Christmas Carol performance. While the Cher Show turns back time, do not let this terrific moment to see the show pass you by, because remember, the beat goes on. For tickets and more information, visit www.nsmt.org, call 978-232-7200, or visit the North Shore Music Theater box office in person at 54 Dunham Road, Beverly, Mass. 01915. To read the full review, visit METRMag.com. Okay, well, that's it for this week. Just a reminder that the shows listed and reviewed on METRMag and on this podcast are a mere sampling of the great theater that's happening in the state of Massachusetts. Any images and information used during the course of this broadcast are used by permission by the theater companies involved. If any group has been missed, it is not intentional. Please make sure to continue sending me information. Send your information to reviews@metermag.com. And again, we'll try to get you listed on the website, or we'll mention you on this podcast, or both. And next week, we're going to have some new reviews, which will include Wait Until Dark, which begins this weekend at Cannon Theater in Devons. Murder by Two in Stoneham from Greater Boston Stage Company. Lizard Boy the Musical, which I have no idea what that one's about. It's from Speakeasy Stage Company in Boston, so I'm looking forward to that. And finally, Steel Magnolias out in West Springfield from the Majestic Theater. So another jam-packed week to close out the month. So here's hoping everyone has a great weekend, and until next time, here's hoping that you'll take some time to see what's happening this week in Massachusetts theater. Thank you, and bye-bye.